you see the core of table fellowship, the loyalty of covenant when it's a land covenant. And you see Abraham dwelling at the oaks of Mamre for many years, including what Yahweh mentions in the parasha this week, and I appeared. And of course, we see in Genesis 18, and he appeared. Now, obviously, there's a lot of variables here. I just black and whited this, okay? There's gray areas, there's variables, there's a lot of extra stuff that I can't bring into this teaching that plays a role in the finished work of the death of Yeshua, which errantly is called the cross. Now, I think it is very important to understand that there was not a wrathful, insatiable God who needed to be satiated, because otherwise we were going to have to bloodlet. That is not the God I serve. And I don't really care what you say about that. I serve Yahweh Racham. I serve Yahweh, the God of compassion. And Yeshua is trying to tell that to those Pharisees when he says, if y'all would have known what this verse means, you would have never condemned my disciples. Because everybody had this sentiment and this idea that somehow there needed to be a pleasing sacrifice or aroma to God. That's table fellowship, not satiation of Zeus. Let go of your Olympian BS. Let go of Hades. Let go of Zeus. Let go of Athena. Let go of all of that, because at the core of this thing is the Greek Hellenization of the Jews and the Greek Hellenization of the Gentiles, and the propagation of everything Greek to the world that was maintained within the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, and therefore the Germans, and therefore the Prussians, and therefore the Gauls and Visigoths, and therefore Britannia, and therefore the American culture. You see, there's a progressive, anti-Semitic, antinomian, Nicolaitan sentiment being propagated as a result of an adherence to Hellenism. Who's the hero? Who's the hero of the Catholic Church that a lot of people don't know this? One of the heroes of the Catholic Church, read by almost everybody who goes to Catholic seminary. You'll never guess it. Aristotle. Aristotle. Do you hear that? The Greek philosopher who trained Alexander the Great, who propagated Hellenism to the world after he conquered it, is a hero in the seminaries of the church that is supposed to represent Christ here on earth. There is a point in time where this gets into a very difficult position, and now I go to the extreme. Now you actually get to hear that part that sounds like a fanatic. The name of God is blasphemed in the sentiment that he's a wrathful, insatiable God. You're accusing him of being a jerk. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life, had nothing to do with the death of Yeshua. Believing in him was sufficient. Because why? He was Torah made flesh. He was the example of the instruction, the beneficial force of agency here on earth as an example for us. Whoever believes in him, that was that sentiment of following a rabbi, being baptized under the name of a rabbi. You see, that's the part that people don't realize. If you are in Christ, then you cannot believe that the intensification of all power in the universe is some malevolent jerk. Every process of him, from Adam until now, until this very moment, has been mercy. Look what he tells Pharaoh. In this parasha, this is what he tells Pharaoh. Let me read it to you real quick, and then we will conclude. Verse 15, 9:15, Exodus 9:15. I could have lifted my hand and struck you and your people with a plague to wipe you off the face of the earth. But I've spared you for a purpose. And Paul talks about this in Romans, where he says, what if, speculating, midrashing, with who? With the Pharisees in Rome. That's what the book of Romans is written for, and to whom. That's why he calls them brethren. And that's why he says that for those of you who know the law, over and over and over again in that whole book. But in Romans 9, this is what he says. He says, what if God, in his mercy, has patience with the vessels of wrath to demonstrate his kindness to the vessels of honor? What stirred his wrath? What stirred his wrath? That's what you need to ask yourself. What did Paul understand had stirred his wrath? Social injustice, senseless violence, a lack of protection of the innocent, an exploitation of the poor. It's at the core. It's at the very core of Torah. And yet you just want to throw it out and say, yeah, you know what? This one may apply to me, but this one doesn't. So now, what does this mean? What is the point here, right? Because who cares? Who cares if God gave the sacrifices in order to have fellowship with him? Right? Because they've been done away with. But how many of you at Passover, and this is for those who are Shomer Torah, Torah keepers, how many of you at Passover eat a slaughtered lamb? Let's say that you use a kosher butcher. What do we know about that? We know that the shechting was done correctly. We know that the cuts of the lamb that were provided were cared for and not contaminated with other meats. Can you say that of a butcher just off the streets who sacrifices pig right along with beef? Did you know that there's scientific proof that the reason why beef or meat that has worms or parasites in it is because it was exposed to pork? That is disturbing to me. But it's not good enough, right? It's not good enough to get you to stop. But there are those who believe in Torah, who believe that the sacrifices have been done away with because they still buy into that hogwash about satisfying an insatiable God. No. That was never his intention. That was never his desire, or it would have said it. But what? I have desired mercy more than I have desired sacrifices. And I have desired that you know me more than I have desired offering. I don't even need to get into the names of the sacrifices, the burnt offering, the wave offering, the free will offering, the sin offering, because they're all connected in with the table fellowship. And you could go study those words yourself. Now that I have changed your mind, renewed your mind, you can go and you can be content that the next time that you eat a steak, you know that it most likely was provided to you through a system of health laws that were developed from Torah. And those who violate it contaminate the meat. So now, does that mean every time you eat a steak, you're supposed to go, oh, you know what? That's actually a sacrifice before God? No, he seems to indicate that there are times when it is necessary. And he seems to indicate that at those times you take what would be ordinary meat and you could declare it to be the table fellowship. Deuteronomy chapter 12 talks about that. About eating it within your gates versus eating it in the place where he would put his name. So, it is an accusation from the synagogue of Satan, from the doctrines of the synagogue of Satan, that you could somehow ever satisfy God by bloodletting. Okay? Second, it is absolutely inappropriate for you to think that Yeshua somehow satisfied some ancient requirement from a wrathful, insatiable God. And it is asinine to think that God changed his mind about the rules of Torah. Period. A misreading and a misunderstanding of the difference between the Melchizedekian priesthood and the Aaronic priesthood are at the core of the problem here. Because there's a need in understanding that one is eternal and one is not. And the writer of Hebrews was trying to give you an illustration and an understanding of the power behind what was going on there. Yeshua guaranteed table fellowship for all. And it's through a consumption of his blood and a consumption of the bread, which is what? Symbolic of that table fellowship. He's offering himself as the perfect lamb, right? The perfect lamb, the lamb without blemish. Okay? Not the perfect sacrifice in the sense of that now God was going to be satiated. No. He offered a way to have table fellowship where we now have this ability to have a clear conscience. Yeshua guaranteed table fellowship for all, Gentiles and Jews alike. Circumcision, uncircumcision. Greek, Scythian, barbarian. You get my point. So stop with this idea that you could somehow do something in the Old Testament that you can't do now in the New Testament that would have somehow satisfied something that is not present in the Old Testament, and that somehow who you're dealing with now through Christ is different from the one who did these things in the Old Testament. I hope that a nation who did the things that they did with the god of Moloch or Baal or Ashtoreth would be wiped out. I hope it. That's the type of God I serve. He is dedicated and loyal and zealous for those who can't protect themselves, including, of all people, slaves, including, of all people, foreigners, people who practice the things themselves. He provides a Torah for them if they dwell within the gates of the Hebrews. When we finally let go of the idea that you can merit anything from God, then you can get into the realm of what it means to be obedient to Him. We're so caught up in the idea of liberty apart from the law that we don't understand that the law itself was given as a benefit of family connection, a benefit of protection of the innocents, a benefit of protection of animals. So, in conclusion, all I'm asking is that you stop accusing Him of being a wrathful, malevolent, insatiable God. I'm doing that on His behalf, asking that of you. So the next time that you've been bad, don't think in your mind you need to give something up. It's not how He works. Think in your mind that He's actually going to bless you with things you don't deserve. Because why? Because that's just how He works. He's in a constant state of trying to build that reconciliation of table fellowship with you. As a husband and as a father in an anthropomorphical sense. Because even that is not the imperceivable God that He is. And so, if your conclusion after this teaching is that He somehow needs, that sacrifice somehow needed to be satisfied, then we don't serve the same God. And I apologize that that's true. And I know that there are people who will not agree with that. But this is a line we have to draw in the sand. I don't serve a God who would do those things. Okay? That's human endeavor. Malevolence is a human creation. The choice to exploit the poor, to exploit the innocent, to treat animals with cruelty is not the choice of God. But the choice to be in fellowship with Him, to help you know the depths of who He is. Because that's like one of the parts here, right? Is to know who He is. Remember I said human existence is based on need. Needs He would provide. So you would know that He's a provider. Okay? All right. Shabbat Shalom.